The ancient grandfather clock in the east wing of Raven's Hollow Palace chimed midnight as Captain Marcus Thornfield completed his final security rounds. The imposing structure had housed the royal family of Aldoria for over 3 centuries, but tonight something felt different. The usual whispers of servants and distant footsteps had been replaced by an unsettling silence that made his skin crawl. Marcus had served as head of palace security for 12 years, ever since King Edmund ascended to the throne. He knew every creaking floorboard, every hidden passage, and every shadow that danced across the marble floors when moonlight filtered through the stained glass windows. But as he walked through the dimly lit corridors, his trained instincts screamed that danger lurked somewhere within these walls. The kingdom of Aldoria had been experiencing political turmoil for months. Economic pressures, border disputes with neighboring nations, and growing unrest among the common people had created a powder keg of tension. King Edmund, though beloved by many, faced mounting pressure from parliament members who questioned his decisions regarding trade agreements and military spending. Some whispered that certain nobles harbored ambitions that extended beyond their current positions. As Marcus approached the royal quarters, he noticed something peculiar. Lady Victoria Ashworth, the king's trusted advisor and childhood friend, was emerging from a meeting room that should have been empty at this hour. Her usually pristine appearance seemed disheveled, and she clutched a leather portfolio against her chest with trembling hands. When she spotted Marcus, her face went pale and she quickly composed herself. "Captain Thornfield," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Working late again, I see. The king certainly appreciates your dedication." Her voice carried a nervous tremor that Marcus had never heard before. Lady Victoria had always been confident and poised, even during the most stressful state functions and political crises. Marcus studied her carefully, noting the beads of perspiration on her forehead despite the cool evening air. "Lady Ashworth, is everything all right? You seem distressed." His hand instinctively moved closer to his weapon, though he tried to keep the gesture subtle. Years of training had taught him to trust his gut feelings, and right now, every alarm bell in his head was ringing. She clutched the portfolio tighter and took a step backward. "Everything is perfectly fine, Captain. I was simply reviewing some documents for tomorrow's council meeting. You know how thorough the king expects us to be with our preparations." Her laugh sounded forced and hollow in the empty hallway. Before Marcus could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the main staircase. Lord Reginald Blackwood, the king's cousin and second in line to the throne, appeared at the top of the stairs. His expensive clothes were wrinkled and his usually perfectly styled hair was unkempt. When he saw Marcus and Lady Victoria together, his expression shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like panic. "Marcus, Victoria," he said, attempting to sound casual but failing miserably. "What brings you both to this part of the palace so late?" His eyes darted between them, and Marcus noticed how his hands shook slightly as he straightened his jacket. Lord Blackwood had always been ambitious, but lately, his behavior had become increasingly erratic. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus felt like he had stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple late-night meeting. His training kicked in, and he began mentally cataloging escape routes and potential threats. The way both nobles were acting suggested they had been discussing something they desperately wanted to keep secret. "I should return to my quarters," Lady Victoria said quickly, still clutching her portfolio. "The morning will come soon enough." She hurried past Marcus, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor as she disappeared down the corridor. The sound echoed ominously through the empty halls. Lord Blackwood watched her go, then turned back to Marcus with an expression that seemed to be weighing his options. "Captain, I trust you understand the importance of discretion in your position. Sometimes matters of state require privacy, even from those we trust most." His words carried an underlying threat that made Marcus's blood run cold. As both nobles departed in different directions, Marcus stood alone in the hallway, his mind racing with questions. What had they been discussing that required such secrecy? Why did they both look terrified when they saw him? And most importantly, what did this mean for King Edmund's safety? The captain had sworn an oath to protect the royal family with his life. But he was beginning to realize that the greatest threats might not come from foreign enemies or common criminals. The grandfather clock chimed again, marking another hour closer to dawn. Marcus knew that sleep would not come easily tonight. not when every instinct told him that something sinister was brewing within the very walls he was sworn to protect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, he would remain vigilant, watching and waiting for the next piece of this dangerous puzzle to reveal itself. The next morning brought an unusual flurry of activity to Ravenshollow Palace. Marcus arrived early to his office, having barely slept after the strange encounter the previous night. His desk was already covered with reports from the night shift guards, but none mentioned anything unusual about Lady Victoria or Lord Blackwood's late-night activities. Either his men had missed something, or the two nobles were very skilled at avoiding detection. King Edmund appeared for his morning briefing looking tired and stressed. The 45-year-old monarch had aged considerably in recent months, with new lines etched around his eyes and gray threading through his dark hair. He sat heavily in his chair and rubbed his temples as Marcus delivered the routine security updates. "Your Majesty," Marcus began carefully, "I noticed some unusual activity in the East Wing last night. Perhaps we should consider increasing patrols in that area." He chose his words deliberately, not wanting to directly accuse anyone without more evidence, but hoping to gauge the king's reaction. Edmund looked up sharply. "What kind of unusual activity? Was there a security breach?" His voice carried genuine concern, and Marcus could see no hint of deception in his expression. Either the king was completely unaware of whatever Lady Victoria and Lord Blackwood had been planning, or he was an exceptional actor. Before Marcus could respond, Lady Victoria entered the room carrying the same leather portfolio from the night before. In the morning light, she appeared composed and professional, showing no signs of the nervousness Marcus had witnessed hours earlier. She greeted both men with her usual warm smile and took her customary seat beside the king's desk. "Good morning, Your Majesty, Captain Thornfield," she said smoothly. "I have the trade agreements you requested, along with the updated security assessments for next week's state dinner." She placed the portfolio on the desk and opened it, revealing neat stacks of official documents. Marcus wondered if these were the same papers she had been clutching so desperately the night before. The king began reviewing the documents while Lady Victoria provided explanations and recommendations. Marcus watched her carefully, noting how her hands remained steady and her voice confident. If not for witnessing her strange behavior firsthand, he would never have suspected anything amiss. Her transformation from the frightened woman of last night to this poised advisor was remarkable and deeply troubling. During a brief pause in their discussion, Marcus excused himself and made his way to the palace archives. If Lady Victoria and Lord Blackwood were plotting something, there might be clues in their recent activities or communications. The elderly archivist, Thomas Whitmore, had worked in the palace for over 30 years and knew more about the royal family's history than anyone alive. "Thomas," Marcus said quietly, approaching the old man's desk, "I need to review some recent correspondence and meeting schedules. Specifically anything involving Lady Victoria or Lord Blackwood over the past month." He tried to make the request sound routine, but Thomas's sharp eyes suggested he understood the gravity of the situation. The archivist nodded and disappeared into the maze of filing cabinets and document storage rooms. He returned 20 minutes later with several folders containing correspondence, meeting minutes, and appointment logs. Marcus thanked him and found a quiet corner to review the materials. What he discovered sent chills down his spine. Over the past 3 weeks, Lady Victoria and Lord Blackwood had held numerous private meetings, often scheduled during times when the king was occupied with other duties. The official meeting minutes were vague, mentioning only administrative matters and policy discussions. However, Marcus noticed a pattern in the timing that suggested these meetings were deliberately arranged to avoid detection. More disturbing were several letters exchanged between Lady Victoria and various parliament members who had been vocal critics of King Edmund's policies. The letters were carefully worded, but Marcus could read between the lines. They discussed concerns about the king's fitness to rule and the need for strong leadership during these challenging times. While not explicitly treasonous, the correspondence painted a picture of growing dissent among certain political factions. As Marcus continued reading, he found references to a special session scheduled for the following evening. The location was listed as the old chapel in the palace's south wing, a building that had been closed for renovations for the past 6 months. The guest list included several influential nobles and parliament members, all known critics of the current administration. The captain's hands trembled as he realized the implications. This wasn't just political maneuvering or palace gossip. The evidence suggested a coordinated effort to undermine King Edmund's authority, possibly even to remove him from power. The question remained whether they intended to achieve this through political means or something far more sinister. Marcus quickly photographed the relevant documents with his secure camera and returned the folders to Thomas. He needed to investigate the chapel location and determine exactly what was being planned. As he left the archives, he made a mental note to increase security around the king without being obvious about it. If his suspicions were correct, Edmund was in grave danger from people he trusted most. The afternoon passed slowly as Marcus struggled to maintain his normal routine, while his mind raced with possibilities. During the king's afternoon walk in the royal gardens, Marcus positioned additional guards along the route, claiming it was a routine security enhancement. King Edmund seemed oblivious to the increased protection, chatting pleasantly with Lady Victoria about upcoming diplomatic visits and cultural events. Watching them together, Marcus felt a pang of sadness. The king clearly trusted Lady Victoria completely, treating her more like family than an employee. The thought that she might be betraying that trust for political gain or personal ambition made Marcus's stomach turn. How long had she been planning this? And what role did Lord Blackwood play in her schemes? That evening, Marcus implemented a carefully planned surveillance operation. He positioned himself in the abandoned bell tower that overlooked the old chapel, armed with night vision equipment and recording devices. The tower had been empty for years, making it the perfect vantage point to observe the mysterious meeting without being detected. As darkness fell over Ravenshollow Palace, Marcus watched through his binoculars as shadowy figures began approaching the chapel through various routes. They moved carefully, avoiding the main pathways and staying in the shadows cast by ancient oak trees and overgrown hedges. The first to arrive was Lord Blackwood, who used a key to unlock the chapel's side entrance and disappeared inside. Over the next 30 minutes, Marcus counted 8 additional people entering the building. He recognized several faces even in the dim light. Parliament members Sir Geoffrey Hartwell and Lady Margaret Thornbury, both vocal opponents of King Edmund's recent policies. There was also Duke Harrison Pembroke, whose family had historic claims to lands that the current king had redistributed to commoner farmers. Lady Victoria arrived last, again carrying her leather portfolio. She moved with purpose but glanced around nervously before entering the chapel. Marcus adjusted his recording equipment and prepared to document whatever transpired inside. The old building's windows were boarded up, but he had noticed earlier that one of the boards on the east side was loose enough to provide a listening point. Carefully making his way down from the tower, Marcus crept through the undergrowth until he reached the chapel's exterior wall. The loose board created a small gap that allowed both sound and a limited view of the interior. What he saw and heard made his blood run cold. The conspirators had arranged chairs in a circle around a table covered with documents and maps. Lady Victoria stood at the head of the table, no longer the composed advisor Marcus knew, but transformed into a commanding figure radiating authority and determination. Her voice carried clearly through the gap as she addressed the assembled group. "Gentlemen and ladies," she began, "we all know why we're here. King Edmund's reign has brought nothing but economic disaster and international embarrassment to Aldoria. His weak leadership has made us the laughingstock of neighboring kingdoms, and his naive policies have brought us to the brink of financial ruin." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Lord Blackwood leaned forward in his chair, adding, "The people are losing faith in the monarchy. If we don't act soon, there could be revolution in the streets. We have a responsibility to save the kingdom from his incompetence." Marcus's heart pounded as he realized he was witnessing a treasonous conspiracy. But Lady Victoria's next words shocked him even more than he had prepared for. "The time for half-measures and political maneuvering has passed," she continued, pulling documents from her portfolio. "I have here signed statements from key military commanders expressing their willingness to support a change in leadership. General Morrison has agreed to secure the palace with his loyal troops, while Admiral Blackthorne will ensure the Navy's support for our cause." Duke Pembroke shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Victoria, when you first approached us about this, you spoke of forcing Edmund to abdicate through political pressure. This sounds like you're planning something much more drastic." Lady Victoria's expression hardened. Political pressure hasn't worked, Harrison. He's too stubborn and too convinced of his own righteousness. Sometimes history requires bold action from those brave enough to take it. She opened another folder and spread photographs across the table. These images show the king's private study, his daily routines, and the locations where he's most vulnerable. Marcus strained to see the photographs but could only make out general shapes from his position. The implications, however, were crystal clear. This wasn't just about removing King Edmund from power through political means. They were planning something that could result in his death. Sir Geoffrey Hartwell spoke up, his voice wavering slightly. Victoria, surely you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting. There are limits to what even desperate times justify. Are there, Geoffrey? Lady Victoria replied coldly. Tell that to the farmers who can't feed their families because of Edmund's trade policies. Tell that to the soldiers who died in his pointless border conflicts. Tell that to the children who will inherit a kingdom bankrupted by his incompetence. Her voice rose with passion, and Marcus could see the fanatic gleam in her eyes. Lord Blackwood pulled out a small vial filled with clear liquid. This substance is undetectable in autopsy, he said quietly. A few drops in his evening tea, and by morning the kingdom will believe their king died peacefully in his sleep from a weak heart. The stress of recent months would make such a death completely believable. The room fell silent as the conspirators stared at the vial. Marcus realized he was witnessing the planning of regicide, and his hand moved instinctively to his communication device. He needed to alert the palace guard immediately, but he also needed more evidence to ensure all the conspirators were caught. Lady Margaret Thornberry broke the silence. And then what? Lord Blackwood becomes king? The Parliament will never accept such an obvious power grab, even if they believe Edmund died naturally. Reginald has the bloodline and the legal right, Lady Victoria responded. But more importantly, he understands that the monarchy needs to work with Parliament, not against it. Under his rule, we can implement the reforms necessary to save Aldoria from complete collapse. Marcus watched Lord Blackwood nod solemnly. I never wanted the crown, but if duty calls, I will serve. Edmund's death will be a tragedy, but sometimes tragedy opens the door to necessary change. His words sounded rehearsed, and Marcus suspected this conversation had taken place many times before. The group began discussing logistics, timing, and alibis. They planned to act during the state dinner scheduled for 3 days hence, when the king would be surrounded by potential witnesses, but also when the chaos of the event would provide cover for their actions. Lady Victoria would personally serve the poisoned tea to Edmund during a private moment in his study. As the meeting continued, Marcus gathered enough evidence to expose the entire conspiracy. But he also realized that simply arresting these conspirators might not be enough. Other palace staff members might be involved, and there could be additional plots he wasn't aware of. He needed to return to the palace and develop a comprehensive plan to protect King Edmund while gathering more evidence. Marcus retreated from the chapel as quietly as he had arrived, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed. The evidence was overwhelming, but the situation was more complex than a simple arrest operation. Lady Victoria and Lord Blackwood had mentioned military support, which meant the conspiracy extended far beyond the small group in the chapel. One wrong move could trigger a palace coup or even civil war. Back in his quarters, Marcus spent the rest of the night analyzing his recordings and planning his next steps. He needed allies he could trust completely, but after tonight's revelations, he questioned everyone's loyalty. How deep did this conspiracy go? Were there other palace staff members involved? Could he even trust his own security team? The captain decided his first priority was protecting King Edmund without alerting the conspirators that their plot had been discovered. If they suspected exposure, they might accelerate their timeline or attempt something even more desperate. Marcus needed to be subtle while ensuring the king's safety during the 3 days leading up to the planned assassination. At dawn, Marcus requested a private meeting with Edmund under the guise of discussing enhanced security for the upcoming state dinner. The king received him in his private study, the same room where Lady Victoria planned to poison him in just 3 days. The irony was not lost on Marcus as he carefully chose his words. Your Majesty, Marcus began, I've received intelligence suggesting increased threats against the royal family. Nothing specific, but enough to warrant additional precautions. He couldn't reveal the full truth yet, not when he wasn't certain who else might be listening or reporting back to the conspirators. King Edmund frowned, setting down his morning coffee. What kind of threats, Marcus? Are we talking about foreign agents or domestic unrest? His concern seemed genuine, and Marcus felt more confident that the king remained unaware of the danger surrounding him. The sources are still unclear, sir, but I recommend we modify your routine for the next few days. Perhaps avoid private meetings in isolated areas, and I'd like to personally taste test your food and beverages as an extra precaution. Marcus tried to make the suggestion sound like standard security protocol rather than life or death necessities. The king agreed to the enhanced security measures, though he seemed puzzled by Marcus's obvious tension. You seem particularly concerned, Captain. Is there something specific you're not telling me? Edmund had always been perceptive, and Marcus realized he was struggling to hide his knowledge of the assassination plot. Before Marcus could respond, Lady Victoria knocked on the study door. Your Majesty, I have the final preparations for Thursday's state dinner. May I come in? Her voice sounded perfectly normal, giving no hint of her murderous intentions. Marcus tensed as she entered, knowing he was now in the same room with both the target and the would-be assassin. Of course, Victoria, Edmund replied warmly. Marcus and I were just discussing security arrangements for the dinner. He seems to think we need extra precautions. The king's trusting smile as he looked at Lady Victoria made Marcus feel sick to his stomach. Lady Victoria glanced at Marcus with what appeared to be casual interest, but he caught a flicker of concern in her eyes. How thoughtful of Captain Thornfield. What specific measures are you recommending? Her question sounded innocent, but Marcus realized she was fishing for information about potential obstacles to her plan. Standard protocols, Marcus replied carefully. Enhanced perimeter security, additional background checks on serving staff, that sort of thing. He deliberately kept his answer vague while studying Lady Victoria's reaction. She nodded approvingly, but he noticed her hand unconsciously move toward the portfolio she always carried. The meeting continued with discussions about seating arrangements, diplomatic protocol, and menu selections. Throughout the conversation, Marcus watched Lady Victoria carefully, looking for any signs that she suspected his knowledge of the conspiracy. She appeared completely at ease, playing her role as the loyal advisor to perfection. After Lady Victoria left, Marcus excused himself and immediately contacted his most trusted lieutenant, Sergeant William Hayes. Hayes had served alongside Marcus for 8 years and had proven his loyalty through numerous dangerous situations. If anyone could be trusted with this explosive information, it was Hayes. They met in the armory, a location that provided both privacy and legitimate reasons for their presence. Marcus played portions of his recordings for Hayes, watching the sergeant's expression change from confusion to horror as the implications became clear. "Dear God, Captain," Hayes whispered. "Lady Victoria? I would never have suspected. She's been like family to the king since they were children." The shock in his voice reflected Marcus's own feelings about the betrayal they were witnessing. "That's exactly what makes her so dangerous," Marcus replied. "Edmund trusts her completely. She has access to his private quarters, his food, his daily schedule. She's the perfect assassin because no one would ever suspect her." He paused, then added, "We need to identify everyone involved before we act. This conspiracy has military support, which means it goes much deeper than we initially thought." Hayes nodded grimly. "What do you need me to do, sir?" Marcus outlined his plan. Hayes would discreetly investigate the military connections mentioned in the chapel meeting, particularly General Morrison and Admiral Blackthorne. Meanwhile, Marcus would monitor Lady Victoria's activities and try to identify other palace staff who might be involved in the plot. "We have to assume that some of our own security team might be compromised," Marcus warned. "Don't trust anyone with this information unless you're absolutely certain of their loyalty. One leak could trigger the coup they're planning." That afternoon, Marcus shadowed Lady Victoria from a distance, using his security duties as cover. She maintained her normal routine of meetings and administrative tasks, but he noticed she made several brief stops in areas of the palace where she had no obvious business. She spent 10 minutes in the kitchen storage area, supposedly checking inventory, and another 15 minutes in the servants' quarters, claiming to discuss arrangements for the state dinner. During her visit to the kitchen, Marcus observed her speaking quietly with the head cook, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell. The conversation appeared casual, but Marcus noted how Mrs. Hartwell glanced around nervously before nodding and walking away quickly. The cook's surname also caught his attention, as it matched that of Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, one of the conspirators from the chapel meeting. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, revealing a conspiracy that extended throughout the palace hierarchy. Marcus realized they were facing not just an assassination plot, but a carefully orchestrated coup designed to install Lord Blackwood on the throne with the support of military leaders, parliament members, and palace staff. The second day brought disturbing news from Sergeant Hayes. His investigation into the military connections had revealed that General Morrison and Admiral Blackthorne had indeed been holding secret meetings with select officers, discussing concerns about the kingdom's direction and the need for strong leadership. While not openly treasonous, these discussions had clearly been laying groundwork for military support of a regime change. "Captain," Hayes reported during their clandestine meeting in the palace gardens, "I managed to speak with Lieutenant Colonel Drake, Morrison's aide. He's loyal to the crown, not to Morrison personally. According to Drake, the general has been quietly reassigning officers he considers unreliable and promoting those who share his political views. It looks like they've been planning this for months." Marcus absorbed this information with growing alarm. The conspiracy was even more extensive than he had imagined. "What about the Navy? Admiral Blackthorne has been more subtle, but the pattern is similar. He's scheduled unusual naval exercises for the day after the state dinner, effectively moving loyal ships away from the capital's port while keeping questionable commanders close to home." Hayes paused, then added, "Sir, if they have significant military support, arresting the conspirators might not be enough. We could be facing a full military coup." The weight of responsibility pressed down on Marcus's shoulders. He was no longer just protecting one man's life. He was potentially the only thing standing between Aldoria and civil war. The question was whether he could expose and stop the conspiracy before it reached the point of no return. That evening, Marcus decided to take a calculated risk. He needed more evidence about the poison and Lady Victoria's specific plans, which meant getting closer to the conspiracy's inner circle. He approached Thomas Whitmore in the archives, gambling that the elderly man's loyalty to the crown ran deeper than any political allegiances. "Thomas," Marcus said quietly, "I need your help with something that could save the kingdom, but it's dangerous knowledge. Are you willing to hear me out?" The old archivist studied Marcus's face for a long moment, then nodded solemnly. Marcus played selected portions of his chapel recordings for Thomas, watching the man's face grow pale as he realized the implications. When the recordings ended, Thomas sat in stunned silence for several minutes before speaking. "Captain, I've served this royal family for 3 decades. I watched King Edmund grow from a boy into a man, and I've seen how Lady Victoria has been like a sister to him." His voice cracked with emotion. "To think that she could betray him like this. It's beyond comprehension. I need you to help me access Lady Victoria's private correspondence and personal files," Marcus said. "There might be evidence that could help us understand her motivations and identify other conspirators. Can you do that without arousing suspicion?" Thomas nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. "Lady Victoria has archival privileges that allow her to access historical documents. I can claim she requested certain files for research purposes and accidentally provide access to her personal materials as well. It will take some time, but I can make it happen." While Thomas worked on accessing Lady Victoria's files, Marcus focused on the immediate threat. With less than 24 hours until the state dinner, he needed to ensure that no poison reached King Edmund while also gathering final evidence to expose the entire conspiracy. He implemented additional security measures under the guise of routine protocols. All food and beverages for the royal family would now pass through multiple checkpoints, each monitored by guards Marcus had personally vetted. He also arranged for a loyal palace physician, Dr. Sarah Morrison, no relation to the traitorous general, to be present during the dinner with equipment to detect and treat potential poisoning. Late that night, Thomas contacted Marcus with explosive news. Lady Victoria's personal correspondence revealed the true scope and motivation behind the conspiracy. The files contained communications dating back over a year, showing how she had been systematically recruited by foreign agents working for Eldoria's rival nation of Valenhall. "Captain, you need to see this," Thomas said urgently, spreading documents across his desk. "Lady Victoria has been receiving payments from Valenhall intelligence services. They've been funding the conspiracy and providing strategic guidance. This isn't just about domestic politics. It's foreign-sponsored espionage aimed at destabilizing Eldoria." Marcus studied the correspondence with growing horror. The papers revealed that Valenhall had been planning to annex portions of Eldoria's territory once King Edmund was removed and the kingdom fell into chaos. Lady Victoria's payment records showed she had received over 50,000 gold pieces for her services as a foreign agent. "There's more," Thomas continued, pointing to another set of documents. "She's been passing intelligence about Eldoria's military capabilities, trade secrets, and diplomatic strategies to Valenhall for months. The assassination is just the final phase of a comprehensive plan to destroy the kingdom from within." The revelations transformed Marcus's understanding of the situation entirely. This wasn't simply a domestic power struggle or even a military coup. It was an act of war being conducted through treachery and betrayal. Lady Victoria wasn't just a traitor to King Edmund. She was an enemy agent who had spent years infiltrating the highest levels of Eldoria's government. Marcus photographed all the evidence and made multiple copies, hiding them in different secure locations throughout the palace. If something happened to him, others would be able to expose the conspiracy and protect the kingdom. He also prepared detailed reports for transmission to loyal military commanders outside the capital, ensuring that reinforcements could be summoned if the situation deteriorated. As dawn approached on the day of the state dinner, Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down on him. In less than 12 hours, Lady Victoria would attempt to poison King Edmund, triggering a chain of events that could lead to Eldoria's conquest by foreign enemies. Everything depended on his ability to prevent the assassination while exposing the full extent of the conspiracy. The captain made his final preparations, checking weapons, communication devices, and emergency protocols. He had identified the loyal guards he could trust and positioned them strategically throughout the palace. Dr. Morrison was briefed on the potential poisoning threat and prepared with appropriate antidotes. Hayes had alerted trusted military contacts outside the capital about the potential coup attempt. Now all that remained was to survive the next few hours and prevent a kingdom from falling into enemy hands. Marcus knew that this evening would either mark his greatest triumph as a protector of the crown, or his final failure as conspiracy and treachery destroyed everything he had sworn to defend. The state dinner began promptly at 7 o'clock, with diplomatic guests from 5 neighboring kingdoms filling the grand ballroom of Ravenshollow Palace. Marcus positioned himself where he could observe both King Edmund and Lady Victoria while maintaining the appearance of routine security duties. The irony was not lost on him that foreign dignitaries had come to celebrate diplomatic relations while a foreign-sponsored conspiracy threatened to destroy the very kingdom they were honoring. Lady Victoria looked stunning in an emerald green gown, her demeanor perfectly composed as she moved through the crowd, greeting guests and ensuring protocol was followed. To any observer, she appeared to be the consummate royal advisor, gracious and professional. Only Marcus knew that she carried death in her elegant evening purse, waiting for the right moment to strike. Throughout the first hour of the dinner, Marcus watched every interaction between Lady Victoria and the king. She maintained appropriate distance, engaging in conversations with various guests while keeping King Edmund in her peripheral vision. The patience she displayed was chilling. She showed no signs of nervousness or urgency, suggesting this was not her first mission as an assassin. The planned moment came during the dessert course, when tradition dictated that King Edmund would retire briefly to his study for a private toast with his closest advisors before returning for the evening's entertainment. Lady Victoria excused herself from her conversation with the Valenhall ambassador, claiming she needed to prepare the king's private reception. Marcus's blood ran cold as he realized the terrible irony. The very ambassador whose country had orchestrated this assassination was present as an honored guest, probably positioned to observe the results of their treachery firsthand. He watched as Lady Victoria made her way toward the king's study, her hand casually checking her purse to ensure the poison was readily accessible. Moving quickly but carefully to avoid suspicion, Marcus followed at a distance. He activated his communication device and sent a prearranged signal to Sergeant Hayes and Dr. Morrison, alerting them that the assassination attempt was imminent. Everything now depended on precise timing and flawless execution of their counterplan. King Edmund was already in his study when Lady Victoria arrived, having stepped away from the dinner to review notes for his closing remarks. The room was dimly lit by candlelight, creating an intimate atmosphere that would mask any struggle if the poisoning attempt went wrong. Marcus positioned himself outside the door, listening through the slight gap he had deliberately created earlier. "Your Majesty," Lady Victoria said warmly, "I thought you might appreciate some of your favorite tea before returning to our guests. The evening has been quite successful, hasn't it?" Her voice carried no hint of the betrayal she was about to commit. "How thoughtful of you, Victoria," Edmund replied. "You always know exactly what I need. Please sit with me for a moment. These diplomatic functions can be exhausting, and I value your counsel." The trust and affection in his voice made Marcus's hands clench into fists. Through the gap, Marcus could see Lady Victoria preparing the tea with practiced efficiency. She kept her back turned to the king as she opened her purse and retrieved the small vial of poison. Her movements were smooth and confident, suggesting she had rehearsed this moment many times. "Edmund," she said softly, still facing away as she added the poison to his cup, "I want you to know that everything I've done has been for what I believed was best for the kingdom." Her words carried an odd note of finality, as if she was delivering a eulogy rather than casual conversation. King Edmund seemed puzzled by her tone. "Victoria, you sound strange. Is something troubling you?" He started to rise from his chair, concern evident in his voice. "Please sit," Lady Victoria said, turning with the poisoned tea in her hands. "Drink this and everything will become clear." For the first time, her mask of composure slipped slightly, revealing the conflict that raged beneath her composed exterior. This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for. He burst through the door with his weapon drawn, shouting, "Stop! Do not drink that tea." The suddenness of his entrance caused Lady Victoria to stumble backward, the poisoned cup shattering on the marble floor. King Edmund stared in shock as Marcus quickly moved between him and Lady Victoria. "Marcus, what is the meaning of this? Why are you threatening Lady Victoria?" The king's confusion was understandable. To him, his most trusted advisor had simply been serving tea when his security chief had apparently lost his mind. "Your Majesty, Lady Victoria is a foreign agent working for Valenhall," Marcus said quickly, keeping his weapon trained on the woman who had been like family to the king. "She just attempted to poison you as part of a conspiracy to overthrow your government and deliver Aldoria to enemy control." Lady Victoria's expression hardened as she realized her mission had failed. The gentle advisor vanished completely, replaced by a cold, calculating operative who had been unmasked. "You have no idea what you've done, Captain," she said icily. "Edmund's death would have saved thousands of lives and prevented a war that will now consume both our kingdoms." "Victoria?" King Edmund's voice was barely a whisper as the implications began to dawn on him. "This can't be true. We've known each other since childhood. You're like a sister to me." "I am sorry, Edmund," Lady Victoria replied, her voice softening momentarily. "I genuinely cared for you, but personal feelings cannot override duty to one's true homeland. Valenhall offered me a chance to serve a greater purpose than preserving your failed reign." The admission hit the king like a physical blow. Sergeant Hayes arrived with additional guards, surrounding Lady Victoria and securing the scene. Dr. Morrison rushed in to examine the spilled tea and confirm the presence of poison. Within minutes, the study was filled with loyal personnel working to contain the immediate threat and gather evidence. But Marcus knew the danger was far from over. Lady Victoria's capture would alert the other conspirators that their plot had been exposed. Lord Blackwood, General Morrison, and the other traitors would realize their situation was compromised and might attempt more desperate measures to seize power. "Your Majesty," Marcus said urgently, "we need to get you to a secure location immediately. This conspiracy involves military commanders and parliament members who may attempt a coup now that their primary plan has failed." Even as he spoke, the sound of commotion could be heard from the ballroom. Hayes reported through his communication device that Lord Blackwood had abruptly left the dinner, claiming sudden illness. Other conspirators were also making excuses to depart, suggesting they had received word of Lady Victoria's capture. King Edmund, still reeling from the revelation of his closest friend's betrayal, allowed Marcus to escort him to the palace's secure bunker. As they moved through the corridors, Marcus could hear unusual activity throughout the building. The conspiracy was collapsing, but like a wounded animal, it might lash out with deadly force in its final moments. The next several hours were the longest of Marcus's career as explosions echoed through the capital city, and gunfire rattled the palace windows. General Morrison had indeed attempted a military coup, mobilizing the units under his control to seize key government buildings and communication centers. However, Marcus's advance warnings to loyal commanders had allowed them to prepare countermeasures and rally troops faithful to King Edmund. From the secure bunker beneath the palace, Marcus coordinated with military units throughout the kingdom, while King Edmund worked to maintain communication with loyal governors and foreign allies. The diplomatic guests from the state dinner had been safely evacuated, but not before the Valenhall ambassador was detained on suspicion of coordinating the foreign intelligence operation. "Captain," Sergeant Hayes reported via secure radio, "we've confirmed that Admiral Blackthorne attempted to seize the naval base, but Captain Reynolds had already secured the facility with loyal Marines. Blackthorne is in custody, along with 3 other compromised officers." The news provided some relief, but the situation remained fluid and dangerous. The interrogation of Lady Victoria had revealed the full scope of Valenhall's infiltration of Aldoria's government. Beyond the immediate conspiracy, she disclosed a network of sleeper agents positioned throughout the kingdom's bureaucracy, military, and even the royal household staff. The foreign intelligence operation had been years in the making, with the assassination plot serving as the culmination of extensive espionage activities. "Your Majesty," Marcus said as they reviewed intelligence reports, "Lady Victoria's information has helped us identify over 20 additional foreign agents and compromised officials. The security breach was far more extensive than we initially realized, but we now have the opportunity to clean house completely." King Edmund, who had aged years in a single night, nodded wearily. "To think that Victoria spent all those years planning my death while I trusted her with my life daily. How many state secrets did she pass to our enemies? How many of our citizens died because of information she provided?" The personal betrayal clearly wounded him more than the physical danger he had faced. By dawn, the immediate crisis had passed. General Morrison's coup attempt had failed when the majority of military units remained loyal to the crown. The general himself was captured attempting to flee to the border, along with several of his co-conspirators. Lord Blackwood was found in his estate, having taken his own life rather than face trial for treason. The kitchen staff investigation revealed that Mrs. Hartwell had been prepared to poison multiple dishes if the tea plan failed, suggesting the conspirators had backup methods ready. Her connection to Parliament member Sir Geoffrey Hartwell was confirmed, and both were arrested along with other family members who had been recruited to the cause. Over the following weeks, the full extent of Valenhall's intelligence operation became clear through interrogations and document analysis. The foreign kingdom had spent over 5 years infiltrating Aldoria's government, spending enormous resources to position agents in key locations. Lady Victoria had been their crown jewel, recruited during a diplomatic mission early in her career, and gradually developed into their most valuable asset. The trials that followed shocked the kingdom and neighboring nations alike. The evidence of foreign manipulation in Aldoria's internal affairs led to a complete restructuring of security protocols and intelligence operations. King Edmund, though deeply scarred by the personal betrayal, emerged from the crisis with renewed purpose and stronger support from both military and civilian populations. Marcus was promoted to Director of Royal Security and tasked with implementing comprehensive reforms to prevent future infiltration attempts. His quick thinking and loyalty had not only saved the king's life, but potentially prevented a war that could have consumed multiple kingdoms. The relationship between Aldoria and Valenhall deteriorated to the point of severed diplomatic ties, with economic sanctions imposed and military tensions rising along their shared border. However, the exposure of the conspiracy also led to stronger alliances with other neighboring kingdoms, who recognized the threat that Valenhall's aggressive intelligence operations posed to regional stability. 6 months after the failed assassination, King Edmund addressed the nation in a speech that acknowledged both the betrayal they had suffered and the strength they had shown in overcoming it. "We have learned that trust must be earned through actions, not simply inherited through tradition, he declared. The kingdom of Aldoria has faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger, more vigilant, and more united than ever before. Lady Victoria's fate remained a source of debate throughout the kingdom. Some called for public execution as befitting a traitor, while others argued that her childhood relationship with the king warranted life imprisonment instead. Ultimately, King Edmund chose mercy over vengeance, sentencing her to life in solitary confinement, where she could contemplate the consequences of her choices without becoming a martyr for enemy causes. Marcus often reflected on the events that had nearly destroyed the kingdom he served. The experience had taught him that the greatest threats often came not from obvious enemies, but from those trusted most completely. He had learned that vigilance was not just about protecting against foreign armies or common criminals, but about recognizing that betrayal could wear a familiar face and speak with a trusted voice. In his final report on the conspiracy, Marcus wrote, "The security of a kingdom rests not merely on walls and weapons, but on the character and loyalty of those granted access to its most sacred trusts. We must remain forever watchful, not out of paranoia, but out of love for the ideals and people we are sworn to protect." The kingdom of Aldoria had survived its trial by treachery, but the scars would remain as permanent reminders that freedom and security required constant vigilance from those brave enough to stand guard against the darkness that forever threatened to consume the light.